Hi guys, I've had a lot of people ask me to please do a labour and delivery video, and it's about 7 months overdue, so here I go. Kyla's original due date was the 27th of August, and then when I got to about 23 weeks, they changed it to the 8th of September. Apparently there was some kind of mix-up between the midwife and the ultrasound people, and they wrote the dates, I don't know, dates wrong on my ultrasound or something like that. Anyway, they changed it, and I was really annoyed because it was even longer. I had to wait to see my baby. Anyway, so when I got to 36 weeks, I started having my appointments at the birth centre. Got to 36 weeks, and they said that her head was actually stuck under my ribs, and she was turned up the wrong way. And they said to me, like, they wanted to do an ECV, which is called external cephalic version, which is basically like they manually turn your baby while you're still pregnant. So when I was 37 weeks, they did that. That was extremely painful, and they didn't even tell me that first. You know, they're like, oh, you know, it'll hurt a little bit, and then afterwards I was like, you liar, freaking killed. So basically went into hospital that morning. They monitored Kyla's, you know, heart rate and fetal movements and stuff for like half an hour. And they had to make sure she was awake, so they like gave me freezing cold water, and I had to keep drinking it to wake her up, and it did. And then they gave me an injection of Ventolin, they said it was. Basically like completely relaxed my stomach. It was so weird because like my stomach was really tight, and then all of a sudden it was like all floppy, and you could really like, I don't know, you could see like where there was like this football shaped thing like on my stomach, and that was her in there. And then he just put all this jelly like all over my stomach and just started moving her, and it was just like so intensely painful. And I had like a nurse on this side holding my hand, and then my fiance on this side, and I was screaming. I'm like, oh, you know, they said to me like only I think it was like only 4 out of 10 women can actually like finish the procedure. Like lots and lots of women will sort of get halfway into it and they're like, nah, this is way too painful, stop, or you know, whatever. And so I just put up with it because, you know, I really badly wanted a natural birth, well, you know, at least a vaginal birth, something. So I put up with it, and it worked. Apparently the success rate isn't huge, so, you know, I had my fingers crossed, and it worked. She turned around, so it was really good. There was no problems. They said if she went into fetal distress, they'd have to do an emergency C-section right there and then. I was like, okay, that's fine. So that worked, and then she basically like didn't want to move from there. Like all my appointments, she just didn't, you know, she didn't engage her head at all. And I, you know, tried everything from the ECV appointment on. I tried everything, you know, walking, different kinds of exercises, sex. I tried eating different food to bring on labour. I tried bouncing on a gym ball. Nothing worked. And I'll tell you a funny story. One night I decided to drink a whole bottle, like this big, of castor oil, and I just drank it. Sat there and drank it, and I knew it had a diuretic effect, so I sat on the toilet and I drank it. And it was absolutely disgusting, and even just talking about it, I can taste it in my mouth. Ugh, yuck. And nothing happened. I'm like, okay, Luke, next thing. So we decided to get curry for dinner. Call up, what's the hottest curry you've got? Oh, chicken vindaloo. Yeah, we'll take that. Yeah, that was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done, because, you know, a couple hours later, the diuretic effect sure kicked in, and I'm pretty sure you don't want to have diarrhea when you've eaten curry, and you can guess why. Anyway, so I just gave up. Nothing was going to work. A day after that, I started having contractions at 38 weeks. Went into hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was in so much pain. And she took a look and she goes, "Yep, you're 1 centimetre dilated. Congratulations." And looked at her watch and goes, "Oh, I think your baby's going to be born by tomorrow lunchtime." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it worked, it worked, it worked." And then she goes, "Oh, but we'll need you to go home because you're not, you're not in active labour yet." So went home, contraction stopped, nothing happened. It was just a false labour. I think, with all the stuff I was trying to do, I sort of just brought on like a false labour. Yeah, so that was at 38 weeks. I went to 40 weeks plus 3 days. I honestly thought at this stage I'm going to have to be induced, so I'm just going to wait until then and forget about it. I actually went out that day to buy a breast pump with my mum, and then we went over to a place called Tea Tree Plaza, which is like a huge mall shopping centre type thing. I was about to walk into Target and my mum was like, "No, I need the toilet," and I was like, "Oh, okay." Went into the toilets and I was like, "Yeah, well, I'll go anyway because I always need the toilet." Peed, and then I stood up and I pulled my knickers up, and then all of a sudden I just felt this warm stuff running down my leg, and I was like, "Oh crap, I'm peeing myself, this is so embarrassing, I'll quickly sit down." And then I looked down on the floor and there was like a huge puddle of water, and I was like, "Oh no." And then as I sort of laughed and stuff, more was coming out, and I screamed, I'm like, "Mom, help!" And then I opened the door, and then she's like, "Oh my gosh, your water just broke." And I quickly called up my fiance. I'm like, "Get home from work, my water just broke in Tea Tree Plaza." And all these people are in the toilets and they're looking at me and they're like, "Oh man." And the cleaner comes along, and I was outside the cubicle by this time, and she goes, there was a huge puddle, and she goes, "Is that it?" And I open the door, I'm like, "Oh yeah." And there's also that puddle as well. And she's like, "Oh." And then it was really embarrassing because I was wearing a skirt and it just stuck to me, and as I was walking out, she was following behind me with the mop, and yeah, it was really embarrassing. So I went out the emergency exit. Mum drove me home, and I called up the hospital and was like, "My water's broke," and they're like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, definitely. And she goes to me, "Put a maternity pad on and wait until you get some contractions and wait till they're 5 minutes apart," because at this stage I hadn't had any contractions at all. My waters just broke, that was it, I felt fine. And then I sat in the rocking chair for 2 hours and the contractions got closer together. They were 5 minutes apart, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm in pain, let's go." I called them up, "I'm coming," alright. Stood up, basically, you know what a maternity pad is. They're about this big, pretty much come way up the front and way up the back, and they're as thick as a nappy. I just felt this gush, and it completely filled up the whole pad and just gushed all over the floor, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And then ran to the toilet, gushing everywhere throughout our house, all over our rug, all over the toilet floor again. And then I kept that pad, put it in a plastic bag because they wanted to test to make sure it was my waters, even though hello, clearly it really was. Got to the hospital, and it was really weird, making me fill out all this paperwork, and it was all just really slow. I was kind of like, "Hello, my water just broke, when do I start pushing?" And then my contractions got to 3 minutes apart by midnight. I'm going to have to do part 2, aren't I? Okay. I'll continue from they got to midnight.